Hey everybody, welcome to week 4. This week we'll be focusing on a little bit more on mental health. Just want to make a couple of notes before we get started here. So you should be seeing some grades coming in this week, so I apologize that those have not been posted yet, but you should start to see some grades on some of your discussion boards as well as some of your other assignments. A couple of other notes on the discussion boards. I'd like you to continue to remember to be moderating your own discussion board. So if people are making responses to you or asking questions of you, make sure you're responding back to them so that we can simulate what real discussion is like. And another note is I'm really expecting you when you're making your responses to be more than just I agree and a summary of what someone else has said. So a response should be more than just a simple summary of what that person said. That's not adding to their learning, it's not adding to your learning. A response should really be something that, if you are going to summarize and build on that. So bring something new into the conversation or into the discussion. I encourage you to, if you have a challenge to make, to do that respectfully and to do that in a way that can foster some discussion and foster learning. So, we'll keep working on that through the rest of the semester. But I wanted to start this week looking at some health information. So, you're going to have your assignment for your behavior change contract. That's going to start this week. And so part of that is going to be where you're going to find some reliable health information. So you had an assignment this past week on finding some reliable health information, finding a reliable um, website or news article, or maybe an article that's not reliable and why it's not. So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking through that. So this graph here is a graph that I really like showing because this kind of shows the difference between how the news reports news stories and the difference between how science and researchers look at health studies or especially nutrition studies. So this graphic here is showing all all these red dots represent one individual study. And what they're showing is the studies that show that this particular food or drink protects against cancer. So all the dots on the left side show um, is a study that shows that this particular item is protective against cancer. And on the right side is showing the studies that show that this particular item is a cause of cancer. So you can see for all of these different food and drink items, they're all shown in at least one study to either protect or cause cancer. Um, and so this causes many people to kind of throw their hands up and say, why does it matter? All the science that comes out on these things are going to contradict each other within a few months. So I'm just not going to pay attention to uh, what the new science says, and I'm just going to eat and drink the things that I like and enjoy. So if we look at this though, each of these are individual studies, and this is how the news will often report these health studies. So I'll often report them as a new study or groundbreaking research shows something like this. And there's actually a bias towards studies that are new. So we tend to think that if a study is new, that is building on all the knowledge that we already know, and that the new study is the most valid. But really, oftentimes, in research, what we want to look at is a body of evidence. What does the whole body of evidence show us for how a particular item may affect our body, or in this case, if it's protective against cancer or if it's a cause of cancer. So oftentimes in research, different methods are used, so that can be a reason for different conclusions being made. And oftentimes, um, studies can't always be replicated. So you may see a study that shows that a particular item is very protective against cancer, but other researchers try to replicate this study and are unable to do so. And actually, in science, a lot of times those studies aren't published. So studies that try to replicate a different study don't get published. And if they're not getting published, then people aren't reading them, science isn't getting out there. So all this to say, really, that the way that the news talks about health studies, you've got to be really skeptical of. So what we really want to look at is what is the body of the evidence showing us. And so how do we find some of that reliable health information? So I'm sure all of you have at one point or other tried to find some information, probably on a health topic or other health topics, and you go to the internet to do that, you go to Google to do that, and you come up with an article, you read it, and maybe something in the article or something on that website gives you pause to say, I'm not sure if I can trust this. I'm not sure if it's really reliable. And so it happens pretty often when you're looking for health information. So I've given these really quick tips for you to take as you're looking for your own health information for your project and just as you're trying to find health information in your life for your own personal interest. So first of all, who runs the site or who runs the app? Can you trust them? So is this a website that's being run by a credible organization? Is it being run by maybe a for-profit business that has more of their profits, their bottom line, selling a product in mind? So being able to trust whoever the operators at that site are. And what is the site promising or offering? Does claims seem too good to be true? So more often than not, if something's claiming something that is too good to be true, it often is. So I'm sure many of you have come across excuse me, websites that say something like, doctors don't want you to know about this drug or don't want you to know about this food, or something that with a very clickbait-like title that's promising something very easy, lots of diet tricks or some kind of weight loss supplement. And often these things are trying to push some kind of product on you or sell something that is often not going to be able to do what it promises to do. So really look at what the site may be offering, even if it's in terms of just information. Is what it's promising seem like it's too easy or too maybe more black and white? So maybe you do a little bit more searching to validate those claims. So when was the information written or reviewed, and is it up to date? So I just talked about oftentimes new information. There's a bias towards that, but it's important to consider that we are building on new information all the time. So maybe you find some news that was written maybe 10 years ago or so, and that made some kind of claim. And if you see that, that might be a reason for you to try and see if there's been any more information that's been put out on that topic or that product, and see if there's been any more information that's come out, or any information to validate that, any information to refute that. And where does the information come from? Is it based on scientific research? So is it coming from, there's a lot of health information that you might see that's coming either from opinion, or it's coming from people that are not based in peer-reviewed scientific research. So when I say peer-reviewed, oftentimes in scientific research, an article that's being published will be reviewed by other scientists to validate whether this is whether their claims seem to be true, whether their methods are sound, and whether the interpretations and the conclusions that they come to fit within the rest of the research, and whether they seem to be true and not too misleading. So really finding out if the information is coming from a credible source. And lastly, why does that site or app exist? So is it exist simply to be a means to sell something? Is it ran by a nonprofit organization or a government organization that's simply there to get the information out? So think about websites like WebMD. or Healthline. So those websites have very good resources, but those websites also exist to get you to click on as many things as possible, to see as many ads as possible, possibly click on those ads because they are um, for-profit websites, and so they are trying to make a profit off of that website. So it benefits them for you to click, as many times as possible. So many of you probably know this, but just want to go through what the domain name extensions can mean. So you're going to a website, then whatever you enter after that website name is going to give you an idea of what entity is running that website. So .gov is ran by the U.S. government. So these are often, when we think of health information, these are going to be some of the most credible resources that you can have. And .edu as well. So that's going to be run by an educational institution. So .gov, .edu, usually going to be the most reliable. They're not going to have a kind of conflict of interest in trying to sell you a drug or a product. So .org, professional or nonprofit organization, so they can also provide really reliable information. But sometimes it's an organization that have a particular agenda, so they may be either using some skewed science, or they might have some other kind of motive to try and get you to either buy a product or try and sway your thinking on a particular health topic. And you'll see some of that actually in one of your assignments for this week. And .com, so that's the most common website domain name that you're going to come across. That's a commercial website, so it could be a website for a drug company. And it's usually going to provide the most convenient and accessible information, and however, they are going to be the most susceptible to bias or false stories. So again, you're going to find a lot of health information on these .com websites. More often than not, they're going to be the health information that's interesting, more easier to read, more accessible. But a lot of times it's just going to be on you to make sure that you're verifying that some of the things that they say are true or not. So a lot of websites will post links to the original source material. And so you can go to some of that original source material and check it out for yourself to see if the conclusions you come to looking through that source material are the same that the company comes to as well. So I want to spend the rest of the time of the video going through the behavior change assignment that you will have to do. So everyone is going to have to create for this assignment a behavior change contract. And that's going to be a contract that you will set lining out the kinds of behavior changes you want to try to make throughout this semester. So hopefully everyone came in with some ideas of some health behaviors that they would like to change. And so I'm leaving that pretty open to you for whatever you want to do. So I taught this last semester are a lot of diet and exercise related goals. So those are definitely the most common, but some people had sleep related goals. Some people had smoking cessation, so that was part of a couple people had goals to reduce how much they were smoking. A student had some strategies and some ways that they were going to work on anger management. So I'm leaving this pretty open to you to be able to make this your assignment, make this something that you want to change. So the assignment is posted now on Canvas, so you can take a look at it, but I wanted to go through a couple of quick points that go a little beyond the instructions and some tips for you to take as you're working on this. So part of the contract is going to require you to make some SMART goals. So I'll say that in my experience, most of the points that I'm taking off is for people not having SMART goals. So make sure that your goals are fitting into this criteria of being specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-bound. Okay. And your SMART goals should only be one sentence. So this shouldn't. SMART goals should be really short. So I set this example. That's not a health example, but this is an example of a SMART goal. So I will sell 3 magazines a day for the next month. So it's very specific on what you're going to do. You're going to sell magazines. It's measurable, so there's something quantifiable in there that there's a number, 3 magazines. It's action oriented, so you're actually doing something with this goal you're selling. It's realistic. Now, realistic is something that you may want to set for yourself. Um, what's realistic for you may not be realistic for someone else. So make sure that whatever goal you're setting is something you think can be realistic. And I'll say this too. This is where a lot of people kind of slip up on their goals. So a lot of times we're setting goals that are pretty lofty. I think that our culture kind of encourages us to aim really high and shoot for those really high goals, which are admirable and great. But at the same time, a lot of times if we're not able to meet those goals, we end up having to face barriers or things that are unforeseen. We don't meet those goals, then makes change really difficult. So I just encourage you, as you're setting these goals, to set them really low. Set them in the beginning for something you know that you can attain. And lastly, time oriented. So there should be a time that is set for you to complete this goal and for you to assess if you've been successful or not. So, for instance, this goal is set for the next month. So as you're creating your SMART goals. Make sure that you are setting some kind of time frame for you to complete these goals. I'll say for the purpose of this assignment, your goals shouldn't go beyond the semester. So I would love if you do have goals that you're setting for yourself that go beyond the semester, but for the purposes of the assignment, just make sure that your goals only go through the end of the semester so that you have a time frame to be able to measure your success on these goals or not. To make sure your resources are reliable, so just talked about that. Part of your assignment is going to be identifying resources where you can find health information, find some accountability. So just make sure those resources are reliable. And make sure your strategies are strategies. So there's a place in there for you to create some strategies to meet your health goals. So, going to the gym or something like stop making excuses, those aren't strategies. What I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of a strategy is something that you're going to do to overcome your barriers. So, going to the gym may be something you do to maybe meet a weight loss goal or a weight gain goal or something like that. But there's a reason that you're setting this goal of going to the gym because you haven't been going. There's reasons why you haven't been going. So what are some strategies that you can think of that will keep you motivated to go to the gym? You've been making excuses. So what are the things that are causing you to make some excuses, and what are some strategies that you have to overcome that barrier? And lastly, you're going to set a reward for yourself if you're meeting your behavior change goal by the end of the semester. So make sure those rewards, though, are not alcohol or food-based. So we don't want to be counterproductive here with our goals. So there's some science about setting food-based rewards to and kind of having food set as a reward system, especially like in children, can be problematic. So, there's lots of different rewards that you can come up with to be able to celebrate yourself and be able to celebrate your successes for the semester. So for this week, a couple of assignments that you have to do. There's no reading quiz this week. We're going to still be focusing on Chapter 2, mental health. So complete your behavior change contract. You're going to complete the 2018 Most Shared Health article assignment, so I think y'all find that pretty interesting. I want you to watch some of the TED Talks on depression. So that's one of the mental health topics that we'll be focusing on for this week. So I want you to use some of the time now to reflect on some of your personal thoughts and feelings around mental health. I know many of you mentioned in your intros about how you were excited about this course because you were going to be able to learn some things about mental health, and you're really interested in mental health. So really take the time this week to be able to reflect on some of those thoughts that you may have as we're sharing on the discussion board. Just say too, sometimes this mental health can be a little more controversial than some of the other topics that we'll talk about this year. So just make sure that you're being respectful in the discussion boards, and yeah, just make sure that we're following the discussion board ethics that are laid out in the syllabus. So there's a mental health discussion board that will be on the TED Talks and some of your own thoughts. And lastly, there's going to be a suicide recognition training that I'd like everyone to complete. So this is a training module that UNCG provides for you to be able to recognize the suicide warning signs in someone else or in yourself, and what you can do about it. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and look forward to hearing what y'all have to say for this week.